Hello, and welcome to another episode of Lion's Roar, the DUP's podcast. We're delighted that in this episode, we're joined by Emma Little Pengelly in person. Emma, welcome.
It's fantastic to be here. In fact, it's my very first time on the podcast.
The last time you were just up there.
Yeah,
You
that's
were
right.
zooming in from the United
Yeah,
States.
that's right. So
Yeah.
here in person, that's right. I forgot about that. So,
And so,
but first time actually here in person on the
yeah.
podcast.
Well, welcome. And I guess there's a connection from your last appearance because is in the news. Trump's tariffs are in the news. And of course, you were laying groundwork to protect our interests a number of weeks ago. So give us a sense of what the discussions were like at the executive and the concerns that we have for Northern Ireland.
Like absolutely, a huge amount of movement on this issue, even over the course of the last number of weeks. It just so happened that whenever I was over in Washington, D.C., this issue was very much emerging as a big challenge. It actually worked out very well because it was a good opportunity for me and the DUP team over in DC to be raising these issues to, particularly to those people who are around the president and those people who will be influencing this conversation, such as the UK ambassador to the US. So we got really good opportunity to raise these important issues. I felt it was really, really important that Northern Ireland in particular and the circumstances and the issues we face are central to the considerations of the UK government, but also that the US government were aware of those as well.
Sure. And yesterday in the House of Commons, I was raising with the Prime Minister some of the difficulties we could face in the exports from Northern Ireland to the US or UK exports. But it's imports to Northern Ireland and the EU retaliatory tariffs, if they were to make them, that could cause us an issue. Now, the Prime Minister responded in a number of ways. He said that he will act in our national interest, but he also indicated that you'd had some engagement with the Business Secretary himself.
So yesterday I had the conversation with Jonathan Reynolds, who's the Secretary of State for Business. Douglas Alexander was on that call as well. So of course, sitting here today after the big announcement of President Trump, just just a short while ago, that very much was around us being on 10% tariffs and the European Union in 20%. So of course, being in 10% is better than a 20% situation. But of course, we know that the UK is in a very different trading relationship with the US than the EU. The UK is a much more equally based relationship. And of course, the UK importantly contributes significantly more to the likes of NATO and to defence than many other countries as well. So we are in a different position. And I know that the UK government, in particular, led by the Prime Minister, but of course, we've all been playing our part in really pushing for that awareness, for that special arrangement for the UK. So I do think today that the Prime Minister and the government will be pleased that they're not just in a global flat rate of well above perhaps 20%, but indeed that the UK is a 10% rate. But over the course of the next couple of weeks, those discussions are likely to continue and continue with the aim of bringing that down further. That, of course, will benefit Northern Ireland. A lot of confusion about this, but of course, Northern Ireland is part of the UK Customs Union, and as part of the UK, we, of course, are subject to that UK tariff, not to the EU tariff, which is double what the UK 10% one is.
Yeah, sure. And you are joint head of our government. We're privileged that you're in that position and you represent our interests. And you've been doing that in Washington. You engage with businesses out there, and you've been engaging with businesses over the course of this week. I mean, what's your sense of how prepared they are or concerned they are for the impact of the tariffs?
Well, I think business is really concerned because it's not just this tariff issue. It's not just the very specific implications for this for the UK and for Northern Ireland. There is concern that the overall sort of tariff war, if we get into that area, and very likely that we are increasingly going to get into retaliatory tariffs as well. If we are in that space, there are risks in terms of a global economy impact, in terms of potential recession, higher costs, much more protectionism in many different places, which of course traditionally has led to increased costs. But of course, business is also facing some of those bad decisions that have been made by the Chancellor and our own UK government. So, for example, that increase in employers' and national insurance contributions, that's just hit there on the 1st of April. We know from talking to so many businesses, this is all business, small, medium size and large, being hit by all of this additional cost. That is stifling growth. This is a chancellor that really needed growth across the UK. She made some bad decisions. We've talked about this before She made these bad decisions in terms of the budget. She had the opportunity to reverse those decisions in her spending statement just last week. She didn't do that. She decided to stick with that, not to reverse, and indeed cut more from public spending as well. If she wants to publicly spend more, she needs to get that economic growth. And as you know, in Northern Ireland here, we need that additional spend, not just on our public services, but to support our businesses as well.
Yeah. And already, in the last 24 hours, people have been saying because of the tariff changes, irrespective of the fiscal changes in the UK, her headroom has gone. The speculation that come autumn with a budget, there may be the requirement to raise taxes is almost now baked in. There's now a fundamental expectation that that might happen. A friend of the podcast is the Federation of Small Business. We've had some of their colleagues on in the past, and Roger Pollan was on the radio this morning. He was talking about some of the choices that the EU might have around retaliatory tariffs, suggesting that in one mechanism they could exempt Northern Ireland. And of course, you had some useful conversations with some of the diplomatic corps from the European Union. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, we raised these issues with the German ambassador to the UK and the French ambassador to the UK. Of course, understandably, to some extent, the EU will be focused on EU issues. And that's a concern for us because our focus is on championing Northern Ireland to make sure that Northern Ireland issues are fully considered in all of this. And we don't want any direct impact of those potential retaliatory tariffs, but nor do we want to be indirectly caught up as collateral damage in this. My understanding very clearly is that there are legal ways that we can be excluded from whatever the EU decides to do, bearing in mind that the EU tariff of 20% is because there is a combination of tariff and non-tariff barriers to US trade in the EU. That doesn't apply to Northern Ireland or the UK. So why would we be penalised because of that? And also, we are not involved in the political decision on how the EU is going to retaliate or to hit back on this. So, of course, all of this is a danger to Northern Ireland. It's really important, as I've been doing, as you've been doing, to make sure that we are championing those Northern Ireland issues at every opportunity, really vociferously making sure that Northern Ireland's voice is heard. Business needs support in Northern Ireland. It needs support across this United Kingdom. We need to get that economic growth, and the Chancellor really needs to focus on that now more than ever because of this global economic turmoil that we're in at the moment.
Yeah. And so you stand up for Northern Ireland, you speak out for Northern Ireland. I do that, we do that as a party. And very often the arguments we're making should be beneficial to everyone in Northern Ireland. Yet in the last 24 hours, there's still that sense that there are some so wedded to the European Union or the ideal or so contaminated by the process of Brexit that they almost struggle with putting forward arguments that should be to our benefit. Do you think the executive will speak with one voice on tariffs, or do you think it'll be left to us to stand up and speak up for Northern Ireland?
Look, I think there are a range of views, but certainly from our perspective, there's no doubt that the lower we can get these US tariffs on the UK, the better. And even if that means that it is significantly lower than the EU, ultimately our focus is around Northern Ireland. People talk about putting, Trump's whole agenda is about putting America first. Our agenda is about putting Northern Ireland first. That is the focus on what we're doing. That's what people expect of us. And I certainly won't be found wanting in that regard, as you haven't been either. I know that at Westminster, you're championing that, as you did just there at Prime Minister's questions, to make sure that those Northern Ireland issues are high up the agenda. And of course, if we aren't there championing that, they could very easily be forgotten about. And that is critical because there are options here for the European Union. They don't have to include us in this. But of course, more importantly, we want our UK government to be making that case on our behalf and ensuring that our businesses can thrive and not to be hit by these types of issues. So, of course, it is important that we look after Northern Ireland interests as part of the UK. There's been some talk about whether or not the UK should retaliate in the same way as the EU. But of course, we know that this is very reductive. The idea of getting into a huge tariff and trade war is not helpful, not to us in Northern Ireland or UK or the EU, but indeed for that global economy. What would be better is that if everybody looks at those tariffs and non-trade barriers and reduce those down to support that free trade, export and import insofar as you can, while of course protecting, the key issues that you want to protect. But there are definitely things that can be done to alleviate the current economic pressure.
Yeah, it's been quite odd today and since the speech was made by President Trump that there are plenty of people who say tariffs are not a good thing, but never reflect that their country's tariffs are twice that that's been imposed by the
Mhm.
United States. And so no self-reflection that they should reduce the barriers that they've placed on the United States.
And also the fact there's a lot of nuance, obviously, in what the position is, because it's not just those tariffs as we would traditionally understand a tariff to be. Much of this is around non-tariff barriers to trade, and that is reflected in the trade surplus, trade deficit situation. So, of course, it is complicated, but we do want to be an economy that can trade internationally while supporting our own businesses. And that's why I think it does come back. You mentioned about the Federation of Small Business. Northern Ireland is very much a place of small to medium sized business. DUP has always been a champion of business here in Northern Ireland because we know that's the backbone of our economy. It is those businesses that are providing that much needed employment that's really growing our economy and pushing our economy here in Northern Ireland. We must support them. And at the moment, they're just simply not getting that support from the UK government. That's not good enough. You've been raising it in Parliament. Our MP and Lords teams have been raising it. And indeed, in the Assembly, we've been doing that in this role directly to the Prime Minister, to the Chancellor, and others, because we need to see those decisions made to support business. And that includes reversing from this terrible decision on national insurance employers' contributions, but also other things that's stifling growth. We need to get that economic growth across the UK.
Yeah, and so we'll keep going. We'll keep doing what we do. Just like the last time you were on the podcast, you're rushing out the door, but rushing out the door for a good reason, because whilst there's uncertainty around tariffs and we don't know just how they will fall or the impact they will have on our business, it's not all doom and gloom. Tell us about where you're going now.
Well, very much the message still is Northern Ireland is open for business. And we've got fantastic businesses, not just our Indigenous businesses here that are thriving and just want that support for them to be able to do what they're doing and to grow. But of course, attracting that foreign direct investment, those visitors, that tourism. And of course, golf plays a big role in that. And I'm just heading up to Portrush to the opening of the new hotel there. So I'm getting the opportunity to open that hotel. And it's great to see because this is a really, high-end, five-star hotel attracting people into Northern Ireland to come and play golf, of course, but also to see what we can offer because many of these people are also people with investments and investment opportunities for us, people who are involved in business and politics as well. And that's a great opportunity for us to have that USP or unique selling point, being not just the great things that we have across our economy and our people here, but also things like golf that makes us stand out in a very crowded global marketplace.
Yeah, no, great. You'll enjoy it. It looks like a fantastic facility. I've watched it grow and prosper as it's been built over the last year or so. When you come down from the Royal Court Hotel and you
Mhm.
see Dunluce Lodge, now it's open. I'll still drive past it and not be able to go in because it's a bit rich for my taste, but it'll suit you down to the ground.
It may be the only time I get the opportunity to take a look
Yeah.
around, but look, it's good to see, and it does represent a huge investment, and it's an investment done with, the local representatives working hand on hand with, the business people, the investors, with, all of those different agencies, because that's how this works. Everybody coming together and being able to create these things. So it's good to see. It's always good to see that investment and people doing well. And that's why, it's tough. It's tough financially out there. There wasn't a lot of joy in the Chancellor's spring statement, but of course, we are trying to push ahead with our ambitious agenda, particularly on economic growth, and this is exactly the kind of thing that we want to see.
Well, Emma, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the studio of Lions Roar. And to all of you at home, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Thank you for following us on our journey as we continue to stand up and speak up for Northern Ireland. Please like and subscribe, share our podcasts, and look out for us on other podcasts too. I think there's one just about to land in the near future, which might give you a laugh. But thank you very much. See you again.